Because once you learn that boundaries don't make the sky fall, you stop living like you're responsible for holding it up. It is Halloween after all, just before we go any further. Even the sun rests. It sets so it can rise again. It doesn't apologize for the night, and it doesn't question its worth just because it's not shining. It trusts that the light will return when it's meant to, and that the world needs the balance of both. So if you've been running on fumes lately, trying to glow through the burnout, maybe it's time to take a hint from the cosmos. Even solar panels need the sun. You can still be a light source and need a recharge. Hi, loves. Welcome back to Amy's View Unscripted. I'm Amy, and this is Life in Motion, where we talk about what it means to really live, love, and grow one honest conversation, and probably one too many cups of coffee at a time. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. We take the big stuff, the messy, human, what am I even doing moments, and turn them into something we can actually live with, laugh about, and hopefully learn from. Today, I want to talk about energy. Not the kind that comes from caffeine, though trust me, I'm not knocking that form of divine intervention, but the kind that runs deeper. Your emotional energy, your spiritual battery, that quiet current that fuels your focus, your love, your peace, and your ability to show up for the world without burning out from it. Because lately, it feels like we've all been a little fried. Like we're walking solar flares trying to power the planet while our own systems are running on low power mode. And here's the thing, of course I get it. The world feels heavy right now. There's so much noise, so much urgency, so much input. Everywhere you look, there's just another thing demanding your attention, your empathy, your outrage, your hope. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you're just trying to be a decent human, to care, to contribute, to stay kind. But that's where the danger creeps in. When caring turns into carrying. When compassion becomes depletion. When our desire to show up for the world starts to cost us our ability to stay whole within it. That's what this conversation is about. Protecting your energy. Not by retreating from the world, but by learning how to move through it with intention. It's not isolation, it's circulation. It's the difference between shutting down and recharging. And I think that we forget that sometimes. Especially those of us who grew up believing that being a good person meant always saying yes to everything. You know the conditioning, the don't rock the boat, be polite, help where you can, don't make anyone uncomfortable ever, training we all got somewhere along the way. And while those things were meant to teach kindness, they often taught self-abandonment instead. Because the lessons about boundaries typically didn't come with that particular kind of training. So we say yes when we mean no. We give when we're empty. We overextend because we don't want to disappoint anyone. And then we wonder why we're resentful, exhausted, or quietly falling apart behind the scenes. Sound familiar? Same. That's why I think of energy management as less of a trend and more of a life skill. Because when we start treating our energy like something valuable, something measurable, renewable, and worth protecting, everything else just starts to fall into place. You stop rushing into obligations that drain you. You stop apologizing for needing rest. You start noticing what and who replenishes you instead of depletes you. And that shift changes everything. Now, let me be clear, protecting your energy doesn't mean you stop showing up for people. It doesn't mean you ghost your friends or quit your job or turn into a hermit who only communicates via carrier pigeon and crystal grids. It just means that you learn to show up consciously, that you learn to give without linking. You learn to hold space for others and yourself. Because here's the truth. You can't be fully present for the world if you're perpetually drained by it. Compassion has a battery life too. And when we ignore that, when we push past our natural limits in the name of being strong, being dependable, or being good, that's when resentment creeps in. Not because we stopped caring, but because we kept caring past the point of sustainability. The world doesn't need us to burn out. It needs us to burn steady. So, as we move through this episode, we're going to talk about what that actually looks like, how to protect both your peace and your purpose, how to recharge without retreating, how to say no without guilt, and yes, without exhaustion. And maybe most importantly, how to stay connected to the people and causes you care about without losing the connection to yourself. Because when your energy is balanced, when your inner current is flowing clearly, you don't just feel better, you show up better. You think clearer, you love deeper, you handle chaos with a little more grace. You stop being reactive and start being responsive. You stop running on fumes and start running on focus. And if you've been with me through this series, you know that that's what life in motion is all about. This ongoing ripple between the inner world and the outer one. We've talked about connection, compassion, humanity, boundaries, and healing. But all of that, all of it, depends on how we manage our own current first. Because the ripples start here, in your body, in your breath, in your ability to ground, rest, and renew. So take a breath with me. Let the world spin for a second without you trying to hold it up. Even the sun rests, and so can you. Somewhere along the way, we all started believing that being good meant being on all the time, always available, always positive, always productive. Like the world handed us invisible flashlights and said, "Congratulations, you're now responsible for keeping everything lit." And most of us said, "Okay, cool," and immediately burned through the batteries. Because that's what we've been taught, right? If you're not shining, you're slacking. If you're not posting, producing, helping, or hustling, you're somehow falling behind. The grind culture PR team deserves an award for that campaign. They've had us convinced that rest is laziness and the quiet is failure. But let's call it what it is: nonsense. You are not a power outlet. You're a current. You're meant to flow, not constantly be plugged into other people's needs. And when you think of yourself as a current, everything kind of shifts. A current moves, it adapts, it knows when to surge and when to soften. If it tried to stay at full force all the time, it would erode everything around it, including itself. That's what happens to people, too. We erode, slowly, quietly, until one day we wake up cynical, snappy, or numb, wondering when exactly the light started to feel like labor. I remember a season in my life where I wore exhaustion like a badge. The less sleep I got, the more valuable I felt. I was convinced that tired equaled trying. But burnout doesn't make you noble. It just makes you a little crispy from all that emotional frying. And crispy people, no matter how well intentioned, can't radiate warmth for long. We have to stop glamorizing depletion. You don't earn worth by running yourself into the ground. You don't prove love by ignoring your limits. And you certainly don't build success by dismantling your peace. That's not light, that's leakage. Now, let's talk about empathy for a second, because that's the other place our energy quietly drains away. Empathy is beautiful. It's what makes us human. But unchecked empathy can become emotional overdrafting. It's like letting everyone else swipe your card because you hate seeing anyone in need. Eventually, the account hits zero and you're surprised you don't have anything left for yourself. That's not heartless, it's just math. So here's the question: how do we stay kind without becoming casualties of our own kindness? It starts with permission. The permission to rest without guilt, to disengage without disappearing, to let the world spin for a bit without your supervision. The truth is, the world keeps turning even when you sit down. Promise, I've tested it. There's a rhythm to sustainable energy. Think of it like breathing. Inhale, exhale, give, receive, shine, rest. The inhale matters just as much as the exhale. Most of us are over exhaling, constantly giving, sharing, posting, producing, and wondering why we're dizzy. You need the inhale, the stillness, the moments that don't get posted because they're just for you. And here's where people sometimes get it twisted. Resting doesn't mean quitting. Resting means you care about the mission enough to protect the messenger. When you rest, you recharge your clarity. You remember why you're doing all of this in the first place. Without that reset, purpose turns into pressure and passion turns into performance. Let's put this in real world terms. How many times have you said yes when your whole body screamed no? How many times have you agreed to plans that you didn't have the bandwidth for, answered messages that could have waited, or taken on work that wasn't yours because you didn't want anyone to be disappointed? It's okay. Me too. We're conditioned for overexhaustion. We think that saying no makes us selfish or ungrateful or difficult, even. But the truth is, every yes that violates your energy boundary is just postponed burnout. So when you start treating no like an act of self respect, not rebellion, you start conserving the current. You know, I can't remember the exact moment I said no for the first time without guilt, but I can tell you how it felt. I remember my heart pounding, my voice steady, but my stomach in full rebellion. But I said it, and the world didn't burn down. No lightning bolt struck, no one stormed out. Life just kept moving. And in that quiet aftershock, I realized something huge. I'd been terrified of a consequence that didn't even exist. That moment changed me because once you learn that boundaries don't make the sky fall, you stop living like you're responsible for holding it up. You start realizing that protecting your energy doesn't shrink your love, it refines it. Here's another truth: people who genuinely care about you will want you to protect your energy. They'll celebrate your boundaries because they know it means you'll have more authentic space for them when you do show up. And the ones who guilt you for resting, They're just used to the free electricity. Let the lights flicker for them if they must. You are not their generator. There's this cultural lie that the brightest people never dim. But the brightest people I know, the ones who glow from within, are masters of strategic darkness. They unplug, they step back, they refill. They understand that real light doesn't scream for attention, it rests to stay radiant. And you can feel it when they walk into a room. That calm steadiness that says, I'm here, but not to perform. That's power. That's presence. That's what sustainable energy looks like. So maybe this week is your cue to stop trying to be everyone's power source. Maybe it's your turn to live like a current, deliberate, flexible, and flowing around objects instead of short-circuiting over them. We talk a lot about boundaries like they're trendy, like saying no is this radical, new age rebellion against the system. But really, boundaries are just the grown-up version of learning to use your words. Still, most of us were taught that no is a bad one. We were told to share, to be polite, to not make a fuss, to say yes, even when our gut whispered otherwise. And that training runs deep, especially for those of us who learned early on that keeping the peace meant keeping ourselves small. I just shared that the first time I said the word no out loud, the world didn't burn down. But what surprised me the most was what came after. The quiet. The way my body exhaled like it's been waiting its whole life for permission. But the real turning point wasn't that first no. It was the few that followed. The ones I didn't even have to rehearse. The ones that came from calm instead of panic. That's when no stopped feeling like rebellion and started feeling like self-trust. Like maintenance, not defiance. Maybe that's the balance. Understanding that no isn't rejection, it's direction. It doesn't push people away. It guides them toward the healthiest way to be in your life. Protecting your energy doesn't mean building a fortress. It means creating a door. One that locks, unlocks, and opens by choice. Because isolation is armor built from fear. Boundaries are structure born from self-respect. One cuts you off. The other lets you breathe. Let's be honest. There's a big difference between I need a weekend to recharge and I'm moving to the woods to live off the grid with my emotional support squirrel. You don't have to vanish to take care of yourself. But on a separate note, also about the squirrel, most of the time, the healthiest choice is the smallest one. Muting notifications. Except for those notifications when I have new videos out, definitely leave those. Okay, just those ones. Not answering every text immediately. Declining an invitation when your body says no. Leaving a conversation that's draining. Those aren't acts of disconnection, they're acts of discernment. Here's the irony though. Once you start protecting your energy, people do notice. The ones who love you for your presence will adapt. The ones who relied on your overgiving might not. And that's okay. They're just realizing they were renting space in your energy field rent-free. You can love someone deeply and still say, this doesn't work for me right now. You can care about a cause and admit, I need a break from the noise. You can support people and still have a life outside their emergencies. That's not selfish, it's sustainable. The fear underneath all this, the real reason we resist boundaries, is usually loss. We're afraid that saying no will make people leave and that they'll take our worth with them. But the truth? The right ones don't. The people meant for you will respect the pause. They'll trust your rhythm, not demand your constant performance. They'll say, rest. I'll see you when you're recharged. Those are your people. Everyone else? Well, they were just mistaking access for affection. It's also important to recognize that protecting your energy isn't just about other people. Sometimes it's about your own habits, the way you overcommit, overthink, or overscroll yourself into depletion. You can drain your own battery just by living in constant comparison, or by trying to keep up with everyone else's highlight reel healing. Newsflash, you can't self-care your way out of burnout if you're still checking your phone every 5 seconds to see how other people are self-caring. Unplugging means mentally too. Here's a thought exercise I use when I feel that drain start creeping in. I ask myself, is this mine to hold? If the answer is no, I set it down, gently but intentionally, because not every worry is your assignment. Not every pain needs your participation. You can witness without absorbing. That's the mature empathy. Compassion with boundaries. When you protect your energy this way, you start noticing how calmer life feels. You stop reacting from panic and you start responding from peace. People sense it too. You become the friend others come to because you're grounded, not because you're available 24/7. And that energy, it's magnetic. It teaches by example because calm doesn't shout, but it does echo. Now, some people might say, well, if everyone starts protecting their energy, then who's going to help the helpers? The answer is simple. The healthy helpers, the ones who've learned to refill between rescues, the ones who understand that empathy isn't meant to be martyrdom. When you take care of your own current, you create cleaner energy for everyone around you. You model balance instead of burnout, and you prove that presence doesn't require depletion. So here's the challenge. This week, when someone asks something of you, pause before you answer. Check your battery level. Ask yourself if you have the energy to give freely or if you're about to give from scarcity. And if it's the latter, let no be your act of love for them and for you. Because boundaries aren't barriers, they're bridges that help keep connections honest. And honesty, even when it feels uncomfortable, is the highest form of respect. Protecting your energy isn't isolation, it's integration. The art of being in the world without dissolving into it. You get to be whole and connected, rooted and reaching. You don't have to burn everything down to keep your light safe. You just have to remember, it's yours to tend, not theirs to take. Here's the part people rarely talk about when it comes to protecting your energy. It's not just about what you say no to. It's about what you say yes to with intention. Because when you don't choose where your energy goes, the world will happily choose it for you. We like to imagine focus as some sort of mystical state we stumble into, but really, it's the quiet discipline of direction. The moment you stop letting your energy drip into 100 different tabs and decide, okay, this is where my light's going today. Goal setting gets a bad reputation because people associate it with grind culture, like vision boards gathering dust or New Year's resolutions that fizzle out by February. But true focus isn't about pressure, it's about purpose. It's how you tell your energy what to do instead of letting anxiety do the scheduling. When you write your goals down, you're drawing your own map. And maps aren't rigid, they're guidance systems. They remind you where you said you wanted to go before the noise of the world started giving you turn by turn instructions that you never asked for. That map can be as detailed or as dreamy as you need it to be. Start the garden, launch the project, rest without guilt. It doesn't matter if it's empire building or inner peace cultivating, the act of naming it focuses the current. Because every time you bring clarity to what you want, you automatically filter out what doesn't align. That's energy management in its purest form. If you've read proven personal and business strategies, you already know this truth lives on both sides of the fence. In business, clear strategy keeps you from wasting resources. Personally, clear intention keeps you from wasting yourself. They're not separate worlds, they're two languages saying the same thing. Direct your energy on purpose. Setting goals is how you give your light structure. It's how you anchor your potential so that it actually becomes progress. And no, that doesn't mean you have to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning to drink your celery juice and journal about your empire. If you do, bless you and your chlorophyll. It just means having a touch point, something that tells you, here's what matters today. Maybe that's one line in your notebook. Maybe it's a sticky note on your bathroom mirror that says, protect your peace. Send the email. Drink water. And that's enough. Clarity is cumulative. The beautiful side effect of focused flow is that it naturally protects your energy. When you're living aligned with your map, distractions tend to lose their charm. Suddenly, you don't have time to spiral into other people's drama. You don't have time to over-explain your boundaries or doom scroll yourself into apathy. You're too busy living your alignment. It's not that the noise disappears, it's that you stop mistaking it for direction. This is where discipline meets devotion. Not the harsh kind that punishes you for falling behind, but the kind that reminds you you're worth following through for. When you choose what to focus on each day, your wellness, your craft, your family, your stillness, you're sending yourself a message. I trust me with my own energy. That kind of self-trust is magnetic. It doesn't need validation because it creates its own momentum. Focus also keeps resentment at bay. When you're scattered, everything feels like an interruption. But when you're focused, interruptions can't hijack you. They either fit the flow or they fall away. It's the energetic version of budgeting. You spend your attention where it brings return, and you stop investing in chaos. One of my favorite small rituals is to end the day by jotting down 3 lines. What gave me energy today? What drained it? What deserves more of it tomorrow? That's it. A mini audit. No fancy planner required. It's like checking your emotional bank balance before you overdraft. Over time, you start to notice patterns. The people, habits, or environments that consistently recharge you or quietly siphon you every day. And awareness is everything. Once you see it, you can shift it. This is also where grace comes in. Focus doesn't mean rigidity. There will be days your map changes because that's what life does. Throws a curveball, hands you a detour, or just requires a nap instead of a milestone. That's not failure, that's navigation. Even the best maps need rerouting when the terrain shifts. The goal isn't to force the plan, it's to stay in a relationship with it. To ask daily, does this still align with the energy I want to live in? When you build that relationship with focus, the rest of your world starts to respond. You become less reactive and more responsive. You attract opportunities that match your clarity instead of chaos that mirrors confusion. Because the universe, God, the source, whatever language you use, all seem to reward intentional direction. They move where you move. So if you've been feeling drained, scattered, or unsure, maybe it's not that you're doing too little. Maybe it's because you're doing too much that isn't yours. Focus is the friend of energy. It doesn't tighten your life, it tunes it. It reminds you that you don't have to chase everything to live meaningfully. You just have to stay aligned with what's calling to you. Protecting your energy isn't only about rest. It's about redirection. It's about knowing when to step back and when to step fully in. Because when your flow has focus, you stop surviving your days and you start shaping them. And that's when life starts to feel less like a race and more like a rhythm. Every episode, every reflection, every small shift we make, it all circles back here. Because what we do with our own energy doesn't stop with us. It sets the tone for everything we touch. We tend to imagine change as something massive, revolution, breakthroughs, awakenings that shake the earth. But in reality, most transformation starts quietly with one person learning how to stay centered in the middle of a storm. When your energy is balanced, you start influencing the field around you without even trying. You walk into a room and people breathe easier, not because you fixed something for them, but because your steadiness gives their nervous system permission to calm down too. That's the ripple. It's not performative, it's contagious authenticity. You know that friend who never raises their voice but somehow settles the chaos just by being there? That's energy management in action. The calmest current always guides the flow. The mistake we make is thinking that in order to help the world, we have to absorb its pain. We don't. We help the world by refusing to add more static to it, by staying grounded enough to be a tuning fork for clarity, not a megaphone for panic. And that doesn't mean pretending that everything's fine when it's clearly not. It means anchoring in reality and hope at the same time. Because optimism without grounding is denial, but grounding without optimism is despair. We need both to keep the current clean. There's this image I love, standing near a body of water and tossing a single pebble in. That tiny plunk feels insignificant, right? But then you watch the ripples spread, overlapping, merging, reshaping the surface until the whole thing looks completely different. That's what every conscious act of energy management does. When you rest, you ripple steadiness. When you speak with clarity instead of reaction, you ripple reason. When you choose joy in small moments, you ripple resilience. And eventually, those ripples meet someone else's. And that's how collective healing actually happens. Not through grand gestures, but through micro acts of awareness multiplied across a million people's ordinary days. You've heard me say it before. Healing yourself is healing the whole, because energy is relational. Every conversation, every exchange, every gesture carries a charge. And when yours is balanced, when your words, your presence, your choices come from clarity instead of depletion, you shift the tone of what's possible around you. You're part of the feedback loop. So when you care for your own current, you automatically clean the water for everyone else. Sometimes that looks like activism. Sometimes it looks like a nap. Sometimes it's calling a friend, planting something green, turning off the news, or saying, I can't hold this right now, but I can pray, I can hope, and I can send love. Small things, big impact. Because the point isn't to do everything, it's to do your thing, fully charged and intentionally offered. That's how that ripple stays alive. I also think of it like this. If each of us tended to our own energy like gardeners, we'd stop trying to steal from each other's soil. We'd understand that my thriving doesn't take away from yours, it fertilizes it. That when I set a boundary, I'm actually making room for more authentic connection, not less. That when I rest, I'm strengthening the quality of what I give, not withholding it. That's community through wholeness. So as you move through this week, maybe take a moment to notice your ripple, not just what you do, but the energy behind it. Is it frantic, hopeful, exhausted, peaceful? Because intention colors impact. And the more intentional you become with your own current, the more it harmonizes with others. That's how we build a better world. Not through constant doing, but through conscious being. Protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's sacred. Because when you treat your own light like something worth tending, you remind everyone else to do the same. And slowly, that care circles outward from one person to a family, to a neighborhood, to a planet that starts remembering how to breathe again. That's the ripple. And it always begins with you. Even the sun rests, and then it rises. That's where we began, and it's where we'll end. Because cycles don't close, they evolve. Every sunset is a reminder that the light isn't lost, it's regenerating, waiting to meet the morning stronger than before. You are no different. We've spent this episode exploring how to protect, focus, and share your energy in a world that doesn't always slow down enough to recognize it. And if there's one truth I hope you hold on to, it's this. Your energy may not be infinite, but it is renewable when you learn how to tend to it. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to apologize for boundaries. And you definitely don't have to stay on to prove that you care. Because the world doesn't need more people performing light. It needs people becoming it naturally, sustainably, authentically. Some days your light looks like a sunrise, radiant, loud, full of promise. Other days, it's the faint glow of a candle on a nightstand, whispering, I'm still here. But both count. Both matter. Because both are proof that you're still choosing to stay in motion, even if that motion is slower. We've been taught to think of stillness as stagnation, but stillness is sacred. It's the quiet hum between action and alignment, that place your energy refills before it's ready to ripple again. So if you've been tired lately, or stretched thin, or wondering why the world feels heavier than usual, this is your permission slip to pause. Not to quit, not to vanish, just to rest. To let the light dim long enough to gather itself again. Because when you come back from that rest, you show up clearer. Your words hold more weight. Your presence softens the air around you. And people feel that. They might not know why, but they do. You become proof that peace is possible. Not because your life is easy, but because your energy is intentional. That's power. And power never asks for attention. It simply is. So, take inventory of your light this week. Ask yourself, what restores me? What drains me? What am I giving out of joy? And what am I giving out of obligation? And then, here's the hard part, adjust accordingly. Because protecting your energy isn't just something you do when you burn out. It's something you do so that you don't burn out. It's preventative maintenance for the soul. If you forget everything else, remember this. You don't owe the world your exhaustion. You owe it your presence. And presence can only thrive when it's rooted in care. Care for the people you love, yes, but also care for yourself. That's the balance. And that's the return to light. If this conversation gave you a breath, a laugh, or even just a little perspective, I am so glad you're here. Because this is what life in motion is all about. Not living perfectly, but living consciously. Remembering that even in the noise, we have the power to choose calm. Even in the chaos, we can choose clarity. And even in the dark, we can still be light. If this episode spoke to you, please subscribe, like, and share it forward, not just to boost the channel, but to keep that ripple alive. Every time we connect, reflect, or uplift each other, the current gets stronger. And together, we make this world a little lighter, a little kinder, and a lot more awake. Stay grounded, stay glowing, and keep that light in motion. And I'll see you soon.